on Spotlight Now, continuing on in the conversation of rediscovering Hawaii Soul.
We'll talk about how youth are getting involved. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Aloha, thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday to Spotlight Now. As mentioned, we are going to be continuing our conversation on Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, initiative that is really been put on by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative, a sponsor of this show here on Spotlight Now. And we've been talking to members involved in this movement over the past few years, and we're going to dive deeper into some of the progress that's being made. Of course, we want to encourage all of you watching at home to engage in the conversation. If you have questions for our guests, please feel free to enter your comments and questions into the comment section on Facebook.
And we want to bring in our first guest now, Kamana'o Crab, who, of course, is the Rediscovering Hawaii Soul executive lead. You've been on before, but want to welcome you in. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We always love talking to you, and it's really been interesting to see how Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul has evolved over time. You know, Ryan mentioned that we have been talking to you folks for a couple years now and really seeing this kind of ripple out and widen through the community. I know we're focusing on youth today, but let's back it up a little bit for folks who aren't familiar.
Sure.
What is Rediscovering Hawaii Soul?
Rediscovering Hawaii Soul is a movement of trying to do a collective movement on embracing common values that we all share together for making Hawaii a better place, but also a network to help support, generate individuals for being more engaged civically to address some of our real pressing issues. And so we've been able to develop a framework and values, and then holding different meetings in public-private sector and community to share it, but also now to get everyone involved in. Yeah. That's been about 3-4 years.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the progress that has been made, because I think a lot of the conversations that we had even just a few years ago was really about setting the groundwork, and now we're beginning to see things progress from this. What are some of the key milestones or benchmarks that this movement has been able to accomplish, and some of the things that you've been excited to see happen?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the early milestones was just the convening, because as a background and context, a lot of this was post sort of Mauna Kea of 2019-20, and it was sort of a period of where do we go from here? And so we gathered, Hawaii executive leadership and others gathered to say, we really have to bring our communities together. And so the gathering in August 2021 of the initial orientation was monumental, because that's the first thing that had happened of bringing Native Hawaiian elders and community leaders with business executive leadership to begin thinking about some collaboration on what can we do together. We came up with a framework. We came up with 4 scenarios that really guided our work, and then taking that work out to others and getting feedback. Right now we have close to 300 organizations that we have engaged and continue to engage, and we've expanded our network to approximately over 600 people that we actually have trained, have worked with, or provided workshops with. So we know that it's growing, and we really attribute it to our philosophy of island consciousness, reciprocity, and doing what is right for the future of Hawaii, and then our values in terms of kaia'ulu, community, aina momona, and abundant Hawaii in terms of feeding everyone. We talk about opuali, chiefly island leadership, by Hawaii, for Hawaii, and aloha. Being respectful, compassionate, and kind towards one another. Yeah.
And why do you think that, I mean, that is tremendous growth over the
Right.
last few years. Why do you think that this movement is taking hold and is particularly important in this moment?
I think there was a lot of buy-in and embrace because I think people felt like we are sort of growing apart. And a lot of the issues seem to be very adversarial, and there wasn't a middle ground to come to reasonable solutions that would benefit all. So a lot of times it involved native Hawaiians because how passionate we are about land, water, perpetuating our culture, and how that may be perceived of getting in the way of progress and so forth. So I think this was a process that our elders and business executive leadership felt that if we're going to build a movement, it is something that we have to be collaborative and inclusive about. And this is not just about Native Hawaiian values or Native Hawaiian culture. It is about the rich history of our heritage of descendants of immigrants, and that shared sort of local culture that has developed, but at the same time, acknowledging and honoring Native Hawaiian values and mindset like island consciousness and reciprocity to guide our movement and discussion moving forward. Yeah.
One of the things that's unique about this movement is those who are at the table right now, people who are having conversations that maybe weren't having conversations before, or just engaging in general. I know you guys are recently coming off of yet another networking and workshop opportunity, and speaking with some of the individuals there, one of the things that they said is Hawaii is a small community, and yet there are circles that I've never been able to speak to, or people and individuals that I've never had relationship or conversations with. This is an opportunity, and you're bringing everyone to the table. Speak about the importance of that portion of this movement and how these relationships are helping to solve some of these problems.
Sure. The first 2 years was all about building pilina, or relationships, or connecting with others, as well as building trust. And so we felt like it was a wise investment. And so now that we're sort of in our third, fourth, fifth year, those relationships have flourished, and now we can begin the hard discussions of collaborating. One example is our initiatives around Hawaiian language, Hawaiian history curriculum, both in the Department of Education, Kawi Sang, and Office of Hawaiian Education, and collaborating with others like Mike Latham, the president from Punahou School, and Kealohi Rapun from Punahou, and really bringing that network together. That rarely occurs when you have like Department of Education and private schools, but it's broadening beyond. Now they're looking at AI and the use of AI in terms of Hawaiian language and Hawaiian language translation. We're looking at the military, and that was really hard in terms of especially doing the Red Hill tragedy. But we still convene the major leaders today about engaging the community and then working towards real improvement with the county, with the Sierra Club, with other Native Hawaiian organizations. But also, we want the military to be part of the family of Hawaii. And so that takes some changes on their side as well. But these are just examples of groups that unusually don't really interact. And so our role as Rediscovering Hawaii Soul is to really facilitate and convene them as a backbone agency moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is that we're getting all these different stakeholders together from all these different parts of our
Correct.
community, and now there's also an intergenerational aspect. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that? Because we are going to be speaking in the second half to some youth and youth advocates that are now getting involved in this movement as well. And you also had the recent Kupuna convening.
Right. So as a result of our strategic planning this past year, we were intentional about convening different stakeholders and different levels of leadership in Hawaii. So our first convening was with a Kupuna group of elders, some that were original to our orientation back in 2021, 2022. Many of them attended. And then we also had elders from not just the business community, but in politics. I believe we had former Governor David Ige, Governor Waihe'e, some former legislators, others who were very active in politics and civic engagement. One is to share about the framework of rediscovering Hawaii Soul and the values, but also to get their feedback and sort of, I guess, bend the knee and request that, is this a good thing? And it was a majority consensus it is, and we should move forward. But with sort of some guidance is that we need some changes now, and that they felt like the urgency to really invest in our future needs to happen within these next couple of years. We had a second convening at the ending of May with CEO leadership, again with other Native Hawaiian leaders, as well as some other from the Japanese American community, some Chinese, Korean, and Filipino community leaders as well. And again, same is, are we on the right track? Is this something we want to move forward? Yes. But they wanted more action. You know, they wanted to address some real hardcore issues like affordable housing, stewardship, tourism. And so now, next month, we'll be convening with next-gen leaders. And hopefully, in the near future, we'll be looking at more youth to get involved, because what we realize is if we're looking for a vision 20, 30, 50 years down the line, we really need to educate, nurture, and mentor the youth coming up to care for Hawaii.
One of the things that always seems to be a challenge whenever you have this many voices is just the differences of opinions, right? And so I imagine that when you have the elders, the kupuna, and then you're bringing in next generation, there may not be agreement in how we plan for Hawaii's future. And this is not only confined to just the generational differences, but also just background. We've seen, you talked about TMT, you talked about the military. There are sometimes different viewpoints. How do you manage navigate a space where people may not agree on the best possible path forward?
Wow, that's a really good question, Kale. I'd probably say the first is we really have trained individuals like myself. We have Linnell Marble, Hannah Ishida, and Kira on board. So we have a really, really good team. And then we have support from Rios International, who has been there for the beginning to help guide us. We've also gone out and elicited approximately 12 members from the community, from neighbor islands and Oahu, to commit to systemic training and to help us facilitate these gatherings. But also we have a set of guidelines that it's okay to have diverse and oppositional views about it. But if you're going to speak to the issue, let's be thoughtful, diplomatic, but also have some truth about it, and really spend time sort of teasing out or deconstructing the issues, so we really understand what we are looking at, whether it's a funding issue, whether it's more obligation on other stakeholders to take greater responsibility for our environment. And then we have our facilitators ourselves. And so we have some guidelines that are sort of real simple in terms of allowing everyone to share, have voice. But one of the most prominent comments has been people feel safe, and they feel like this is a pu'uhonua. It's a safe place and space to share, but to be part of a larger discussion about making Hawaii a better place.
Yeah. I think one of the things, having been in some of these convenings and seen the work firsthand, one of the things that I notice is that you are talking about tough issues, but it's not a debate. It's not about me proving that I am right and you are wrong and come to my side.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
just for the viewing audience, so that they have a better understanding of what this work looks like, can you tell us a little bit about the difference in that approach?
Sure. I think this approach is not so much adversarial. It really is identifying certain. It's almost like breaking down big issues into what is it are we disagreeing on, and then let's have a real discussion so we can understand the subsurface issues that perhaps if we get to smaller issues, then we can get to bigger solutions. And I think part of that is really having one-on-one walking pair discussions, kind of getting to know one another. Because I think a lot of times in civic engagement, we're seeing each other as representing either government or one community or one organization. And so that it makes it difficult because of the perceived barriers. So in our convenings, we really work hard at removing that and seeing people as people. And why are you so passionate about, water from a military perspective, or water from a native Hawaiian or Sierra or conservation perspective? But also, can we agree that we need a solution for the long-term sort of perpetuity for what is best for Hawaii? And then that is, once we agree on those kind of issues, then it makes it a little bit easier. It takes time, though. My experience, it's taken like months to years to get to where we are at now. But when you get there, it's much easier for discussions to occur. Yeah.
One of the things that I think people would automatically assume when hearing some of the things that we're discussing and seeing on paper what this looks like is that there must be lawmakers there. This is all about policy. How do you drive policy in government through the legislative body to invoke change? And what you're seeing here and what I've witnessed is quite the opposite. There aren't a lot of lawmakers. There are a few, but this is really community-led. Can you speak to how you're finding ways to solve these issues beyond just the normal construct of the legislative process, but through the actual community and
Right.
leaders in the community?
Correct. And I think we found our niche, sort of identifying really challenging issues, and then those who are involved. Because I think we operate from a perspective is that, we need to better understand what are the stakes of different groups. And so we bring them in and we engage them. And we like to consider it's an invitation and it's voluntary to come. But if we can bring these people, would you be willing to participate in a conversation around the issue? I think that's different because it's not sort of a me against you, or it's not about a power dynamic structure. What we try our best to do is that there's equity among stakeholders in addressing it. But we do realize that the government has a lot of authority and oversight of many public lands, or Department of Education, integrate with state and federal government regarding military issues. So sort of behind the scenes, we are working with key politicians and legislators to keep them abreast of the issues. Just for example, like we're talking about public land trusts, and so we have engaged with Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Don Chang, the Director for Department of Land and Natural Resources, and others about how can Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Rediscovering Hawaii Soul help facilitate some of the issues and perhaps be part of a supportive process of addressing some of these long-standing issues. Yeah.
You know, what's interesting too is because you have Hawaii Executive Collaborative, which for folks who aren't familiar is a consortium of CEOs that are
Correct.
invested in these issues and other
Yes.
issues in the community. You have all these leaders in the private sector as well that are now not necessarily just taking on Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, but also this framework, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
so one of the organizations that has done this that we'll be talking to is Hawaii Kids Can,
Yes.
which is an advocacy group for Hawaii youth, and we'll be talking to them after the break. Tell us a little bit about how you've seen this adopted at Hawaii Kids Can, or maybe at some other organizations, how this framework can kind of permeate other organizations.
Sure. Actually, about 2 years ago, we were aware of Hawaii Kids Can, and then our chair, Dwayne Kurisu, was also aware of kids from Greenland, Ireland that came to Hawaii. And we thought at that time it would be good for Rediscovering Hawaii Soul to kind of help bring them together to discuss some of the challenges that we're working on, as well as have a conversation with them on some of the issues that they're dealing with. And so we had several of their leadership, Hawaii Kids Can, come to some of our convenings and learn about our strategic framework and values, and begin to kind of have conversations internally within their organization around policy and implementation, and then having those discussions with Ireland. And so we look at that as sort of a stepping stone for a model that we want to do. Given the work we've done all these past 4 years, we feel it's a good time for us to begin looking at youth engagement, because we're committed. If we're looking at 30, 50 years down the line, we really need to engage youth and the next generation of leaders to help embrace Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, and then actually take some responsibility now, so that our hands are safe in the next generations of leaders. Yeah.
And as you continue to perpetuate that to the next generation, when you look at the heart of this movement, it really is focusing on Hawaiian values and culture and things and practices that may have been forgotten. And what it seems like you folks are trying to do is bring that back into the conversation.
Correct.
For you, what has that experience been like when you hear leaders discussing some of these Hawaiian virtues that were discussed and that you are focusing on, from Aina Momoa to Pilina, Aloha,
Right.
Opuali'i, all these types of Hawaiian virtues are now being discussed by CEOs
Yes.
and large companies. Talk about that importance and what that means when you see these leaders having these types of conversations around these Hawaiian values.
Actually, it's so welcoming, Clay, because 2 years ago, when our leadership decided that we're committed to this framework, but we had to have real conversations that this is not just promoting Native Hawaiian beliefs and foundation and values, but it's inclusive, okay? But I think what's really a really good feeling is that there's an acknowledgement and honoring of the legitimacy of Ike Hawaii, or Hawaiian knowledge or ancestral knowledge, that is as valuable as Western science. And we can use that knowledge for the benefit of preserving, stewarding our islands better, addressing climate change, global warming, perhaps using some of these values and core practices, cultural practices, as being part of a legitimate economic model for Hawaii, because we're an island archipelago. And so we're applying those concepts, those best practices, and then merging them in a way from a business economic perspective of making Hawaii better. And I think that's really, it's taken a long time, but it's a really good feeling, because we feel almost like our Hawaii Executive Collaborative leadership and our network really is buying into it. And are sharing that they want more how to apply it in their organizations.
Yeah, and what's also so interesting about that is that there is this desire to share from the host culture, and there is this desire to be invited or receive from the other entities that you're
Yes.
talking about, and also a feeling of needing to ask permission, right?
Yes,
I don't
yes.
want to overstep. I don't want to use Hawaiian language if it's going
Correct,
to offend.
correct.
I don't want to adopt these practices if I'm doing it wrong.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that, about, that sort of two-way street that happens where there is a trepidation from maybe someone who is not Native Hawaiian, but feels a call to adopt some of this.
Right. So true, Yunji, is because I do want to acknowledge our elders were Antipua Kanahele, Hokulani Holt, Mapuana de Silver, Kawai Kapu Hewitt, and they really sort of gave permission that if you are born and raised here in Hawaii, if you have moved here to Hawaii, you have some pilina or connection to this place. Therefore, you have some obligation, you have some kuleana responsibility for making it a better place. So once that was established and sort of the kupuna saying, we will share this with you, that comment of people feeling, one, relieved, they also felt an invitation that they can learn Hawaiian language. It's okay to say Hawaiian words. It's okay to share their perspective on what they think Rediscovering Hawaii Soul is. And so that's a really huge hurdle we had to walk over, is because even Native Hawaiians, as part of Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, many of us were not aware of how there was trepidation and some reservations on, like, we didn't have permission to, but now this is giving us some permission to get involved, learn more, and be a better citizen of Hawaii as a collective, collaborative effort. Yeah.
When I just got to ask, when you mentioned some of the names, Antipua, Antimapu, I mean, these are key figures in the Hawaiian community. I wonder, when this was all starting and you're presenting this idea and this movement to these individuals, and yourself included, what was their reaction? I mean, because you imagine they have seen versions of this throughout their lifetime, and that must have been met with some sort of hesitation. That is, what's the difference now? How has it been to see them adopt this and continue on in helping to educate the next generation?
Yeah. Wow, you're really asking some hard questions. No, it's good. It's really good. I tell you, we had a pre-planning meeting amongst us. We had those from Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, Hawaii Executive Collaborative with Rios, and we spent the whole day coming up with names. And it was intentional to look at our elders to guide us. And the reaction when we went out, because I had to call many of them, Corbett Kalama had to call them, and it was sort of a pause by many of them, and it's like, come on now, what is this you want us, and why do you want us to get involved? And we shared, like, we don't know where we're going, but we feel it's needed because we need voices, and we need to try a new pathway to engaging others to discuss many of the real issues that are close to us, but also for our future. So with many of them, the pilina and the trust took time. I would say a good 2 years. But once they got more engaged and they felt comfortable enough to help us develop this framework, and then also ensuring that if they buy into it, Hawaii executive leadership must commit to it. And so once that transpired, it felt like we were all on the canoe together. But definitely some hard discussions about whether or not should we move forward, and can we? And so that took time, but can we? Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I think that is something that I always struggle with this movement is what are the benchmarks? How do we know we're doing right?
Yeah.
And it's something that I always ask
Yes,
you
yes.
on and off
Yeah.
camera, right? That how do we know that this is working? And what you have told me in the past is the process is part of the point.
Correct.
Yeah. So where are you in that? Because now, the network has grown to 600 and more, all these organizations. So what are the benchmarks? How are you measuring that?
Right. So we will be in this iteration moving into 2026 looking more closely at that. As I mentioned earlier, we have about close to 300 organizations we have engaged, over 600 in our network. Some of the real tangibles has been, for example, like our climate change. Chris Benjamin is the head. And so they recently signed in a bill with the governor about the tax that goes to stewarding the environment and the INA. So that's a good example. But what about the others? And so we have like our military group, we have a Kingdom Lands, we have a Ahupua'a group, we have education, and there's another one I can't come. So we're going to engage more on a committee level, but some of the sort of, I guess, tangibles is that we are actually facilitating some discussions between Office of Hawaiian Affairs, DLNR, and then we are also taking our own steps towards looking at the issue of public land trust stewardship. And we'll be coming out with a documentary soon in the next year or two to address those issues. We're looking at more research on the ahupua'a as a legitimate sort of category of a land category, potentially that could address affordable housing. We're looking at the military in terms of more discussions in terms of bringing them together for more panel discussions, given that military lands are up for renewal in the next couple of years. I didn't skirt around it, but we are going to look to more metrics, I guess, more metrics so that we can report back out in terms of our greater progress. But we are also mindful of our process that takes time to develop. Yeah.
We are almost out of time, but before we let you go, just an opportunity to speak to the viewers, those watching, what your message is about this movement. And as we talk about the next generation in our next segment, the importance of that and how people can find more information about the work you're doing.
Great. I think my message is Rediscovering Hawaii Soul is a very genuine grassroots effort that is taking hold in many sectors, in the business, education, Hawaiian community, broader community, amongst other ethnic groups. We welcome others to get involved. I think my message is that this is a movement of rediscovering everything that is positive and very strength-based about Hawaii, our people, our culture, and our heritage. And given all that is happening nationally and globally, I think we are looking internally on how we protect each other and preserve the rich cultural heritage we have here in Hawaii. For more information, you can go to rediscoveringHawaiiSoul.org. For more information, we have videos, we have booklets, and the framework there. We welcome everyone's interest and participation in the future.
Yeah,
Mahalo.
thank you so much. And that website is hawaiisoul.org, and there's a lot of information, as Kamana'o mentioned. It's always good to catch up with you.
Great to see both of you.
And we've got a next segment talking about what this work looks like in action when it comes to the youth. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Mahalo.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight. Now we're continuing on in our conversation about Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, welcoming in two new guests to the show.
Yeah, we're focusing now on how this organization has helped other organizations, especially those focused on youth. We want to welcome in David Sun Miyashiro, Executive Director of Hawaii Kids Can, and Mele Kaneali'i, who is a Molokai High School graduate, now at Hamilton College, and a Hawaii State Youth Commissioner. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So, David, you've been involved with the network for some time now. Tell us a little bit about your involvement and how that's evolved over time, how you adopted these values into your organization.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I was privileged to be able to start Hawaii Kids Can back in 2017. And the goal is, really looking at the question, how do we empower our youth so that they can be our future leaders and help stay in Hawaii and, drive us to better outcomes. And so it was just good luck to be able to attend that first network meeting for Rediscovering Hawaii Soul. I had no idea what to expect. I walked in, no agenda, no sense of who was going to be there. But something about it really, really caught me because I'm like, these are the conversations we need to be having. And this is the way I think that a lot of these productive conversations happen. And so from there, I had always been looking for ways to integrate into the work that we do as an organization. And we are fortunate that we've been in conversation with an organization in the island of Ireland about these similar exact same issues. And so what started as an online Zoom kind of conversation relationship blossomed out to this really cool international exchange with youth from Hawaii and the island of Ireland.
Melanie, I want to ask you, for you, how did you get introduced to this movement and your overall thoughts about being involved so far?
Right. So I first heard about this movement from Hawaii Kids Can last summer. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but very grateful that I was able to this year. And I think, the work, at first, it intrigued me. I didn't really know what to expect. It seemed like there was a lot of uncertainty around these 4 different scenarios and what they could mean, our possible futures or just stories to guide us in the actions that we do as individuals, as communities. But honestly, I went in with so many questions. I came out with so many more questions. And so I think I really liked that it seemed to be action-oriented. And then I grew to understand that it wasn't really about the destination. It wasn't about which scenario is going to happen or what we're going to do. It's more about the process and coming together to talk about these shared values and what matters to us as we move forward in cultivating Hawaii's soul.
Yeah, I know that you recently attended the network gathering, and so tell us a little bit about what those conversations were like, what it was like to be in the room and have all these different leaders kind of interacting in this very unique way.
It was nothing like I expected it to be. In the mornings, we convened as a group and we really grounded ourselves in the ancestral mele, olis, the chants, and kind of learned that those are not just chants and songs, but that is the source of our ecological knowledge. That is the source of how we interact with one another, how we interact with our natural resources. And from that large convening, we went into smaller breakout rooms where we would go deeper into the values. I think they were kaya ulu, aloha, opua ili, opua li'i, aina momona, and I think I'm missing one. But Pilina.
Yeah.
Pilina. That's a really important one. But we got to choose which breakout rooms we wanted to really hone in on, really focus on, and just immerse ourselves in that community and what the future looks like for us, what a community looks like for us, and just all of those aspects. Yeah.
David, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about how what you've learned is being integrated into the organization yourself, what you have seen take place, and how you think it's making a difference in shaping not only those involved with your organizations, but really helping to hopefully move out beyond the organization, but to, the keiki throughout Hawaii.
Absolutely. And I think there's some core principles and values really at the heart of this movement, including concepts like island consciousness. And so really the question I think that kind of sparks me is, if we're going to solve these big problems, and we all acknowledge there are real problems, it can't be from outside. It has to be from within, and it's community out. And so if we're going to do that, then it means we're going to have to really be honest, come to the table, have the hard conversations and discussions, but then, act with a sense of urgency and integrity to move forward and actually try to have some of those productive changes. And so we've seen just even in our organization, I don't think we would have taken on a partnership like the one we have with the island of Ireland if not for kind of having that island consciousness directly in mind. And that, fuels that program as well as a lot of the work we do with folks like the legislature and the Board of Education.
Yeah, I know that you said that you were at that first convening and now you're at this latest one. What kind of shifts did you feel? I mean, how is it different and how have you seen it evolve? We heard Kamana'o talk about all the different organizations that have now adopted this work, but I'm curious, being in the room, having been in the first one and now this one, what you've noticed.
I think it's been a really positive evolution. You think about the pebble into the water and the ripple effect. And so, that first time I think I was a little intimidated because I'm looking around and all these big CEOs and leaders of organizations. And I think going to last week's event, it's still a lot of influential folks, but there's a lot of, practitioners, there are youth there for the first time, folks kind of doing the community level groundwork to actually make these changes happen. And so I think it's really powerful to see, okay, it's great to have, the big wigs all on the same page and, agreeing that we need to move forward, but now actually seeing some of that work take place and organizations implement this on the day-to-day, I think that's really, really impressive.
For you, I'm wondering, what was that experience like when you saw some of the leaders involved and as a student, as someone who is part of this next generation, feeling like you have a voice and you have a say? Because I imagine that it could be somewhat intimidating to be in that room. But how were you able to navigate that, to be able to provide that perspective from, your point of view?
Honestly, I think it was just reminding myself of why I was there in the first place, the values that we were there to uphold, the values that we were continuously being really instilled in us. And honestly, it was really intimidating sometimes. I think there was only about 10 youth and maybe 200 business leaders, nonprofit leaders, and all that stuff. But I think just grounding myself and remembering why I'm there and remembering that some people might not be, I don't know, just going into rooms knowing that the things that I'm thinking in my mind might not be represented, or people might not be bringing it up. And so just remembering that I'm there for a reason and to use my platform when I have it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm also interested in this exchange with Ireland. It doesn't necessarily occur to me, when I think about exchanges with other islands, I tend to think of Aotearoa or, parts of Polynesia. I just don't necessarily think of Ireland. So I'm curious as to this exchange that you had with those students. What are the similarities of the challenges that they face there that we're facing here?
There were so many similarities. I really didn't expect it going in. I had never traveled internationally before the trip, so that was a big culture shock. But also, in terms of similarities, we see cultural similarities and modern day issue similarities. So in terms of cultural similarities, I saw the same connection that Kanaka have to land and language. I saw that a lot in the Irish students, and just how connected and passionate and just committed they were to safeguarding their land, just as we are here, and just as committed they are to safeguarding their language, their native language. And I think in terms of modern day issues, we saw a lot of similarities between the rise of youth who are vaping and getting involved with substance abuse. Also, the housing crisis is a big concern for a lot of students there. A lot of youth were talking about how they don't know if they're going to be able to afford to live in Ireland, which I know is an issue that is close to my heart and many of my classmates and just peers, that we don't know what Hawaii is going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years, and whether or not this is going to continue to be our home.
Wow.
David, for you, if you can share about the experiences and some of the things you've learned through this sort of partnership with Ireland.
Yeah, and I think, Hawaii is such a unique place, obviously, and we have, many, historical realities that have and continue to divide us. And so I think Ireland really is that example of island consciousness, where there's literally a dividing line through the island, right? There's Northern Ireland, which is under the UK, and then there's the sovereign Republic of Ireland. And, for a local Hawaii student, I don't think I learned much about that history at all growing up. And so it was fascinating to see, yes, there were, decades of violence and really horrific and traumatic things that have happened in the communities. But there are lots of great organizations and youth-led organizations that are keeping that peace and really trying to focus on those bigger questions. So seeing that it's possible over there and how youth engage across that very real, literal divide, to me that was really inspiring because it showed even in the most extreme circumstances, we can get to some common understanding.
Yeah, and now, having been at a convening where more youth are invited, what do you hope that their voice is in the Rediscovering Hawaii Soul movement? I mean, how do you hope that they are engaging in this work?
I think it's a very sometimes it's a nuanced issue where I think we don't want to frame it as, okay, so other generations created this mess and we're going to hand it off to our youth to fix it, right? You guys inherit it. I think they do have a very real and different stake in all this, but I think it's like, how do we work multi-generationally? So, how do we better connect our kapuna so they can share those stories and those lived reality with our youth, and then the youth can use the platform they have and that sense of urgency to push for something like, more access to affordable housing, or the $1 million question of, what kinds of jobs are going to enable our youth to stay in Hawaii? Because if we don't stop the bleeding there, I think we are looking at a very different future, as our kapuna get older. So to me, I think this is a great platform to have those multi-generational conversations.
For when you were at this last convening and some of the people that you met, I'm wondering if you could just share some of the conversations that you were having, whether it be about some of the issues and some of the the key specific things that you're addressing, or maybe it's just broadly just the networking that provided. What were some of the key takeaway in the conversations that you left with that you think will resonate with you moving forward?
I think one of the biggest and most influential conversations that I had at that convening was that we all have different ideas of what the ideal community looks like. We all have different ideas of what is the future of Hawaii Soul. And if rooted in aloha aina, equity, and just the collective thriving of land and people, then great. But then there are also harmful interpretations of our ancestral mele that we've talked about, and just how there was a comment at the conference that when you say the word aloha, everybody knows what you mean. And we had a really long conversation about that, about how even the word aloha, or just our values in general, have been used against us, have been commodified, have been used to justify over-tourism and the displacement of our people. And so it's not only being rooted in the values, but being authentic with them, having integrity, and just being rooted in that sense of place.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is sort of what next? What do you, now that you have all this information, so you've had these connections, what do you then do with this? You're going back to school, you'll go back to upstate New York. How do you sort of perpetuate this, even if you can't be physically here in Hawaii?
Right. I think just going back to one of the biggest values that they touched on at the convening, opuali'i, to lead with a courageous, benevolent heart, that really stuck with me as just knowing that how we go about Hawaii's future, we cannot afford to be passive. We cannot afford to be passive leaders, because that will not safeguard our people. It will not safeguard our land. And so just making sure that when it calls for it, we need to be bold. We need to take bold strides. We need to show up for our community. We need to deprioritize ourselves in terms of prioritizing our community, deprioritizing our individual gains for our community gains, and just remembering that it is hard sometimes to be so far away from home and continue to be rooted in aina and just all those values that we touched on. But remembering that there is power, there is power, there is resistance, and still living those values, being so far away in hopes of coming back and then being able to restill it in our communities here. Yeah.
David, for you as someone who is leading an organization that focuses on the next generation, I'm wondering if you can share how some of the things that you've learned are being manifested through maybe the kids that you are involved in the organization, whether you're seeing just these small success stories of interaction, and how you deem success with the next generation, knowing that these might be foreign topics and foreign words, even with Olala Hawaii being incorporated, how that is really making a difference in changing the way in which the next generation are really learning about our past and helping to shape the future.
Yeah, and part of it is, having such a great network of young folks who can go out and do this in their own kind of spheres of influence. And so we've, now worked with 6 to 7 years of young people, and some now spent the last year working at the legislature. Some are off at college on the continent, some are back home, but they're all finding different ways to take what they've learned and try to get more young folks excited and empowered in what they can do to actually speak up. And so it's not speaking up in a way that we're trying to create a little kids table, a mini version of what we're doing. It's like we have real bills, we have real issues that are, before our leaders today, and we want our youth to actually give feedback on that and be part of the process to make sure that what's drafted makes sense to them and that it actually has the impact that's intended. So that's really our goal, is not to create a lesser than version of what adults have, but to fully integrate our youth into that process.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked what you said about this whole idea of the adults having, or the previous generation having created all these issues and then just, here you go, figure it out, right? That we are trying to do this together. I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We were just talking earlier about concepts like the Board of Education. And so the Board of Education actually has a student representative who comes from our public school system, but unfortunately they don't have any formal vote. And so they're there, they listen, they get to contribute, but when it comes time to make a decision, it's like, all right, well, we'll come get you when it's done. And so trying to think about all the different ways that our system tells our young folks, you're not ready to be involved. And so when we talk about civic engagement, it really is looking for how do we actually bring our young folks alongside more of our community leaders and officials so they can actually do that process.
And also just like the responsibility of the government and the community to be investing in young people, not only, as David said, to like be passive actors, but equip us to speak our mind, to write it out, to actually enact change in all those ways.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about the brain drain in Hawaii, people going to the continent and maybe not coming back. I'm just curious for you and your peers, like, is the goal to come home, or where are you on that?
I know a lot of my peers that it is a main concern. A lot of them do see home, especially on Molokai, a really big tie to land and ancestral land, generational land. And so it is a big concern with young people of coming home. And I think, I mean, just for me personally, like the whole reason why I am studying public policy is not just because like in politics is interesting. It's for Hawaii, it's for Maui County, it's for Molokai and Maui and Lanai. It's so that we can bring that knowledge back. And I really do believe that that is the mentality of a lot of Hawaii students who go to the continent, and then they really want to come back, but there are concerns about whether or not that's even feasible.
And what would your message be for, anyone your age or anyone who's part of maybe this next generation of leaders, your encouragement of why this is important and how you would encourage them to engage in this process?
A few words I would say is that leadership starts from the ground up. It doesn't start in boardrooms. It doesn't start in news stations. It doesn't start in political offices. It starts with people coming together and seeing a shared goal. It comes from grassroots organizing and then institutional change and then political and cultural resistance. But I think my overall message would just be that it can start with you. It can start with anyone. It can start with you at any level of your life.
Wow, I think that's a really good place to leave it. What a wonderful thought to end on. Thank you so much for both of you for being here. We'll be right back. Spotlight Now continues right after this.
From the moment you wake up,
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahea.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahea for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great update on what's happening with the Hawaii Executive Collaborates movement of Rediscovering Hawaii. So really hearing about some of the progress that's being made, some of the work that is being done. We heard from Kamana'o Crab, who is part of the organization and the movement as a whole, talking about some of the key successes and some of the challenges that continue to lie ahead. But you really can get a sense that things are really beginning to move, and we're seeing it firsthand.
Yeah, 300 organizations now part of this, 600 individuals. They're having all these different convenings, a network-wide convening just last week, but also these individual meetings with Kupuna, and coming up the next gen cohort will be meeting. And then, of course, getting that youth voice at the table. And we heard about that from David Son Miyashiro and, of course, Mele Kani Ali'i, who really was a fantastic speaker and really a testament about why youth need to be in the room.
And just really getting a different perspective in this conversation that we've had in these shows on Rediscovering Hawaii. So it really was about some of those who have been involved in the process, the CEOs, the kupuna, to share about their vision. And so it's great to see this next generation of leaders really coming in and taking that mantle and running with it, and very impressively in the way in which they are helping to lead this. So a great time. Again, if you want more information, you can always visit hawaiisoul.org or continue to watch Hawaii News Now and our Spotlight Now page.
We'll be talking with the governor next week. There's a lot on his plate as he continues to figure out what he's going to veto and what he will sign. Please be sure to join us next Tuesday. Governor Josh Green takes the whole hour. We'll see you then.
Aloha.